A young woman saves up her money to buy her first car. The grey sedan for sale by the side of the road appears to be an incredible bargain, but she ends up getting way more than she bargained for after she purchases the vehicle. I'm delighted to introduce another tale shared with me at Dr. Creepin's Vault, the subreddit I set up so you could share your stories directly with me, and it's another brilliant one for you this evening, and a great way to start off the week. Now, my dear friends, it's time to sit back with your favorite drink and listen. The last 6 months have consisted of completing online tests, tasks, and learning in order to pass my driver's test, which I did relatively easily. Now I would finally be free to venture wherever my heart desires. Late nights with my girlfriends, trips to the beach, food runs, you name it. I was excited to go out and do what I wanted in my own time, not having to wait for a mother who took 3 hours to get ready, or a father who was always working, or a sister who was too cool to take me anywhere. But, well, a license was useless without a car, which I still needed. I only had $3,000, which I'd accumulated over the last couple of years of birthdays and Christmases, so the car had to be cheap. My mother told me, if I passed my driver's test, she'd take me around town to find a cheap car for sale, used of course. She kept her promise and took me car hunting the day I passed. We were looking for a car that had less than 100,000 miles on it, was reliable, and wouldn't randomly break down on me. In other words, cheap but effective. We searched and searched for a couple of hours. No luck. Every car we found was either too expensive or too used. We reluctantly gave up for the day and went home. We'll go out looking again tomorrow, okay? My mum said. Yeah, sure, I replied, looking out the window as we turned up the long, winding road leading to my house. When we got home, I went straight to my room and looked online for cars. Too expensive, too ugly, too beat up. But there were a few that fit my parameters, but were located hours away. Failing for the second time today, I reluctantly closed my laptop and played some video games. The next morning, I woke up for school and groggily went through my daily routine of shower, get dressed, eat, and wait for my mom to take me to school. Surprisingly, we left early enough to have time to look for more cars for sale. About a half mile from the school, we found a grey sedan with a red handwritten for sale sign sitting on the front windshield. My mum pulled over next to the car and I got out. I peered through the window and saw the car was clean. No ripped chairs or unnatural stains on the ceiling. The car only had 80,000 miles on it. Yeah, it's a bit lame, but it'll work, I thought. I wrote down the number neatly written on the sign and walked back to my mother's car. Well? My mother asked excitedly. I'll call the number after school, I said, but it looks promising. She smiled and took me to school. After school, which was as boring as always, I called the number. The phone rang a couple of times until a deep voice answered the line. What do you want? The voice growled. For a moment, I was at a loss for words. Are you selling a car? I stammered. Immediately his tone switched and he happily said, Oh yeah, sure. The silver one, right? Yeah, the one by the high school. How much do you want for it? I asked. The man paused for a moment. How's 2,500 sound? Jackpot, I thought. I'd even have $500 to spare. I told him I'd buy it, and he agreed to meet me the same day. My mum took me to meet the man where the car was last located. When we got there, I saw a large figure leaning up against a silver sedan. The late evening sun cast his shadow far across the ground like a giant. The for sale sign was removed from the window where it was before. My mum's jovial demeanor changed to one of caution, and she told me to stay in the car while she went to talk to him. I watched her exit our car and approach the man, money in hand. He loomed over her by at least 2 feet and enveloped her in his shadow. After they exchanged some words, he held out his hand and my mum gave him the money. He handed her the keys and walked away, disappearing behind a fence. My mum motioned for me to exit the car and come over to her. You get to drive home, she told me, smiling. I'll be right behind you. She handed me the keys, and I got in the newly purchased car. There was a strange smell. I couldn't place exactly what it was, though. Oil? No, it was too sweet-smelling. Whatever it was, I passed it off as one of those things that an air freshener could easily fix. After adjusting my mirrors and setting up the radio, I began my drive home. It felt odd not having anyone in the car with me for the first time, but I was also filled with a sense of liberation, a sense of freedom. That night, I drove to the store with the extra $500 I had and bought some new windshield wipers, an air freshener, and a couple of CDs. I took the car home and installed the wipers and air fresheners. The sweet smell was still there, but very subtly masked by the lemon air freshener. I opened the trunk and found an L-shaped stain on the false hatch, above where the spare tire was stored. I bent my head down and inhaled through my nose. That's where the smell was coming from. I assumed it was cat piss or something and decided to deal with it another day. I checked the oil, radiator fluid, and gas. All good. My final check was the CD player. If it didn't work, I could just buy a new one with the extra money I had. I opened the case to my Metallica CD and pressed Load CD on the console. Please wait. Error. Eject CD before loading. The guy must have left one of his CDs in here by accident, I thought. I pressed play to see what his taste in music was. No sounds played, and the screen just read, Error. Incompatible format. I ejected the CD and watched as a silver disc slowly slid out of the slit. There was a red happy face written in Sharpie on the top of it. I put my Metallica CD in, and it played crystal clear. No problems. I turned the car off and brought the CD I found inside to my room. I looked at the clock and realized I needed to go to bed for school tomorrow. So I placed the CD on my desk and passed out. I got around to investigating the CD that weekend. It was still sitting there, right where I left it. Red happy face smiling up towards the ceiling. I picked the disc up and slid it into the slot of my television. While I waited for it to play, I looked out my window. It was dark. The street was lit by a single streetlight. I could see my car parked next to my lawn, reflecting a slight orange glint back to me. I jumped as my TV made a loud crackling sound. The screen was covered in static for a moment. Then, an image appeared. It was a silver sedan, parked in front of someone's house. It looked strikingly similar to my car. I heard heavy breathing, and the video began to bounce lightly as the videographer stepped closer to the car. Once he reached the car, the camera panned down to the wheel well. A lanky arm covered with black cloth and a black glove placed something resembling a black cube inside the car. The person holding the camera stood and began walking toward the house. The camera suddenly dropped into the grass, and the screen went black. I could faintly hear footsteps crushing grass, moving farther away. I heard a door getting kicked in. I heard a scream, and I heard it get cut off suddenly. Then I heard footsteps and grass crunching, growing louder. The camera was lifted and pointed toward the house. The door was wide open, and I could barely see some type of red liquid pooled on the floor inside. The person holding the camera was breathing harder now, and walked back to the car. He pulled some keys out of his pocket, unlocked the car, and got in. The screen cut black, and a prompt on the screen said, Play clip 2? Yes or no? I just sat in my chair, thoroughly confused and worried about what I'd just witnessed. What the fuck? I thought to myself. Goosebumps ran across my arms as I realized something. I ran outside to where my car was parked and reached up into the wheel well. I didn't immediately feel anything, but kept searching. My heart was racing, and I constantly checked behind me into the darkness of the night. I froze as my fingers ran across a small, cube-shaped object. I grabbed whatever it was and pulled it out. It was a small black device with a red light on the side. I don't know why, but I turned and threw it into my neighbor's yard. I ran back inside and locked my door. Yeah, I admit, I should have called the cops. Or my parents who were out of town for the weekend. Or my sister who was at her boyfriend's house. Or, well, anyone really. But the thought never immediately occurred to me. All I could think was that I should make sure all the doors were locked, and that my dog, Socks, was inside. I found him in his usual napping spot by my parents' bed. He was a large German shepherd that my mum found on the side of the road a couple of years ago. After I went through this checklist of paranoia and assumed safety, I went back to my room and looked at the TV, which still had the prompt, "Play clip 2, yes or no," flashing on the screen. I moved the cursor over Y and pressed OK. The screen went black for a moment. Then an image appeared. The same grey sedan was sitting in front of a different house this time. I heard heavy breathing as the camera got closer to the house. This, along with the 3 videos I watched after it, were relatively similar. They all depicted the same gruesome event, just different houses every time. I felt sick to my stomach, and cold sweat raced down my back and forehead. Why was this CD in my car? Why was my car in front of each of these houses? Who was the videographer, and what was he doing to the people in the houses? These questions percolated in the back of my mind, and increased my terror exponentially the closer I came to a conclusion. After the 5th video ended, I thought hard about everything I'd seen. Finally, I decided to call 911, admittedly far past due. I reached for the phone, but froze in place when I heard a loud thud on my bedroom door behind me. I sat there with my arm outstretched for a moment, and slowly turned around. I took a step back towards the door. It was completely silent on the other side. I opened the door a crack and peered into the dark hallway. I could hear heavy breathing and a faint jingling, which sounded like keys. Crying now and shaking with fear, I picked up the baseball bat next to my door. Building up all the courage I had, I swung the door open and lifted the bat over my head, ready to attack anything that moved. I'm glad I didn't, because my dog, who had woken up from his nap, had bumped his head on my door, a common sign that he wanted to come into my room. He sat on his haunches, staring up at me, tongue lolling off to one side as he panted. The phantom jingling was just his dog tags clinking off each other. I wiped the tears off my face, feeling embarrassed, and moved aside to let Socks in. As he padded by me, I exhaled a sigh of relief. He laid down next to my bed and looked up at me, with eyes that said, "Sorry for upsetting you." The same puppy eyes he gave me when he went to the bathroom in my house or tore up the furniture. I shuffled over and laid next to him, slowly petting his coat. His presence gave me a true sense of security and comfort. He rested his head on my breast. I drifted to sleep. I'm not sure how long I laid there, but it was still dark when I woke up. I groggily opened my eyes and looked around my room, which was still dimly lit by my TV. Play next clip, yes or no? The contents of the clip flooded back to my mind, and a wave of dread overwhelmed me. My dog noticed my movement and lifted his head in curiosity. I walked to my TV and pressed menu. A chart opened up, and and listed segments to the CD, like chapters in a book. 37 in all. 37 separate videos, and 37 murdered at the hand of this psycho. I knew I was next. I ejected the CD and watched as the red happy face appeared to mock me. I looked out the window at my car. My car was gone. The street was still barely illuminated by the fading streetlight, but my car was no longer parked there. I frantically grabbed my phone and pounded the numbers 911. 911, what's your emergency? I began to sob. Yes, hello, I need help, I cried. My throat began to tighten up, and tears blurred my vision. What's going on? Are you okay? The voice asked. No, yes, but I need help. There's a murderer after me, and my car's gone. Hold on, miss. The voice cut me off. Start from the beginning and slow down. We're sending police officers to help you now, and they'll be there as soon as possible. Now, tell me what happened. I explained everything to the dispatcher. The disc, the car, how I bought it. The dispatcher listened carefully, and when I finished with my sob-filled, half-choked explanation, he ordered me to lock all the doors in the house and hide. Something in his voice sounded worried and almost panicked. I need you to be brave, okay? He said. Just stay on the line with me. I promise everything will be okay. The officers are almost there, but you need to hide now. I looked out to the street and saw that the streetlight was off. The street was pitch black now. 3 loud knocks resonated off my front door. This is the police. Open your door, shouted a deep, gravelly voice from outside. This would have fooled me if there was a police car outside, but there wasn't. I dropped the phone in terror and cowered next to my dog, who sensed my fear and was growling a deep, guttural growl that I'd never heard before. His teeth were bared, and he stood facing the bedroom door, ready to attack anything that came through. It was quiet for a moment, as I hid in my room with socks. That luxury was short-lived, however. I heard my front door get knocked off its hinges. Loud footsteps and heavy breathing echoed down the hall. The stomping went from room to room until it stopped just outside my door. Hiding from the police isn't polite, little lady. The handle on my door rotated slowly, and I pushed my bookcase over to barricade the door. "Ah, you little bitch," screamed the man. He began to slam himself against the door. It bulged and buckled against his immense, superhuman force. The man screamed and howled with every slam, spewing obscenities and curses. I had to escape, and quickly. The door wouldn't hold forever. I ran to my window, unlatched it, and slid it open. The cool breeze met my sweat-drenched body and chilled me to the bone. Among the sound of crickets and frogs, I heard a plethora of high squeals and wails off in the distance. Police cars. My only hope of getting out of this alive. The door behind me flung open, and a tall man dressed in black walked into my room. "Found you," he said enthusiastically from behind the black mask enveloping his face. He stood about 7 feet tall and carried a large hatchet in his left hand. In his right hand was a pair of car keys. The camera was strapped to his chest, and the small red light flickered, indicating that it was still recording. The hatchet was stained brown and black and bent around the handle, but still looked deadly sharp. He raised the hatchet over his head to strike my skull. I closed my eyes as the crude edge began its speedy descent. I heard a loud thud and the sound of tearing cloth. Opening my eyes, I saw my dog had lunged at the man and clamped his jaws around his arm. The man just sighed and wrapped his massive hand around my dog's throat. He whined and kicked his legs wildly, trying to break the man's iron grip. The man threw Socks into my mirror, shattering it into 1,000,000 pieces. Socks lay motionless in a heap of glass. The man turned to me and said, "You dog," in a smug voice. My gut wrenched, and my brain overloaded with feelings of fear and intense sadness. Socks was the best dog I've ever had, killed in the hands of this atrocity. I jumped out of the open window and into the night. The ground was wet and cold, utterly uninviting. The distant sirens grew louder in my ears. I regained my feet and began running. The road scraped up my bare feet, but I didn't care. I ran as fast as possible, away from the house, away from that monster, away from the fear and the hate. Then I looked back over my shoulder and saw something that will haunt me till the day I die. The man had followed me through my window and was pursuing me down the street. He moved like a shadow, avoiding the light of the stars and moon. He was very quiet for his size, almost completely silent. Almost. The only sound he produced was a low, raspy breathing, akin to what I'd heard in the videos. I didn't know it was possible, but I began to run even faster. The sirens were so close, just down the street. I was so close to safety. The breathing grew louder and louder, until I could feel it on the back of my neck. My legs screamed at me to stop, and my feet were surely skinned by the rough road. I didn't care. I just needed to get away. Just around the curve of the road, I saw flashing red and blue lights. An intense pain exploded from my shoulder, and my legs collapsed. I hit the pavement full speed, and tumbled until I crashed to an agonizing stop. Something foreign was protruding from my body. It stuck deep into my shoulder blade, and was the worst pain I'd ever felt. My vision faded to black as I laid there in a growing puddle of my own warm, sweet-smelling blood, sirens echoing in my ears. The rest of this story was told to me in the hospital by one of the 8 officers who responded to my call. "We came as quickly as we could," he told me, sitting next to my hospital bed. "Most of the calls associated with the man you saw, well, let's say we were too late. You're lucky to be alive." He paused for a moment and looked through me. He adopted the 1,000-yard stare that indicated PTSD, and, for a moment, looking truly shaken. "We found you in a puddle of your own blood," he continued. "A rusty old hatchet deep in your shoulder there." He pointed at the tightly packaged bandages on my shoulder. It hurt, but the pain was numbed by some kind of medicine being pumped in my arm, which I was grateful for. "I got out my cruiser and ran up to you, gun drawn. You kept muttering something, almost as if in a coma. Something about a CD, just droning over and over again. The CD. Get the CD." The man ran his hand through his hair and sniffed, clearly distraught. I looked at his name tag. Barry. His name was Barry. "When the rest of the force arrived, we searched your house. You put up a hell of a fight, and did everything by the book. I was impressed." "My dog," I croaked. It hurt to speak. "Is my dog okay?" Barry opened his palms and stared into them. "You're a pup. I carried him out of the house myself. He was cut up pretty bad. I thought he was dead at first, to be frank." The wave of sorrow I felt last night crashed into the shores of my mind. Tears began to freely cascade from my cheeks. "Well, turns out he was alive. Scared the hell out of me and my guys. When he came to, he wouldn't stop barking and biting until he saw you." Barry looked up at me. "Got a vet to patch him up. Man, he was cut up bad, but he's gonna pull through according to the doc." This news was a relief beyond words to me. When I saw him smash into that mirror, I thought I'd lost him forever. "Well, I really must be going," said Barry. "Get some rest, okay? Your parents will be here in a few hours." I nodded as he stood to leave. He stopped before he reached the door and looked back at me. One last thing. Well, we never found the guy, or your car, or that CD you were droning on about." Barry opened the door, leading out to the hallway. "We'll have a police car posted outside your house 24/7. You have my word. You're safe for now." He turned and left the room, quietly clicking the door shut behind him. The next couple of weeks that followed consisted of visits from friends and family while I healed, both mentally and physically. I was very vague about that night when people asked about it. The more I tried to remember, the more I would relive the pain and horror. I would occasionally see him out of the corner of my eye, standing in the darkest shadows, towering over me. Late at night, just as I'm drifting off to sleep, I can faintly hear a low, raspy breathing echoing in my ears. All I wanted to do was forget about that night, but that man forced his way into my mind like he did into my front door. After a couple of weeks, the doctors cleared me to go home. My mother took me home from the hospital. The car ride was very quiet. My mum understood that I didn't want to talk about that night and just move on. So she didn't prod me. I loved her for that. When we pulled into my driveway, there was a brand new Jeep parked there with a bow on top. "Surprise," she smiled. "I bought you this car since, yours was stolen. I hope you like it, dear." She kissed my forehead and walked inside. I followed her in and went to my bedroom. I just needed to get some sleep. I was so tired. The mirror had been repaired and the broken glass removed. The CD was nowhere to be found, just like Barry said. I woke to my dog licking my face. I cried tears of joy and embraced him. He whimpered a bit, as I probably agitated one of his healing cuts. "Sorry, buddy. I have them too." He hopped off the bed and lay down next to me, closing his eyes. The next morning, I woke up to go to school for the first time in weeks. After getting ready, I said bye to my mum and walked outside. I waved to the police car parked across the street and opened the door to my new car. I placed the key in the ignition and adjusted my mirrors. When I pulled down the visor to check my hair, I saw something in the mirror. It was a small, red, happy face, written in red Sharpie.